One of my favorite automotive series on YouTube right now is watching Michael Fassbender and his Porsche career race series that he does as he went through things like Le Mans, different racetracks like that, and just the experience of how he got into motorsport. And if you take a look back into the past, you're gonna see that most actors, when they get what I would call is just a shit ton of money, jump into a motorsport of some kind. And usually, it's track racing. Almost 9 times out of 10, it's track racing. I can put a laundry list of celebrities together that have jumped into automotive racing as their hobby because it's just something that you can jump into once you have a lot of money and you don't have to worry about anything. But there's very few times when you hear somebody making an absolute lot of money, maybe getting, 5, 6 Grammys or something like that. Maybe not start some sort of motorsport endurance racing team, but they start a drift team. That is what T-Pain did. Okay, this is actually a really interesting story about how T-Pain started Nappy Boy Automotive with a couple of key figures that you may know from the automotive industry and why he even decided to jump into this in the first place, which by the way, I'm Alex Martini with 200 stores on Instagram, and I'm over here on Torque Motorsport to talk about all things drifting and Torque Drift 2 related, and I want to tell you a story about T-Pain, because it's actually really interesting. Which, by the way, if you haven't yet, you're gonna wanna go check out Torque Drift 2. We've got a couple brands that we've released that are out in newsroom articles at torquemotorsport.io. There's a lot of really cool brands that you probably have already heard of, like Haltech, NRG. We've got brands like Nexen, BC Racing, Feel Suspension, and a whole bunch more. That's all to get brands and partners into the game of Torque Drift 2, which you can actually go out and have your first little playable experience if you download the TD2 launcher. It's super exciting. We're releasing new, awesome, massive changes to the game almost every single month. So if you want to keep up to date with all of the game developments, be sure to subscribe because we're also dropping development logs and newsroom articles talking about all the changes that we're making, and we're really excited to release finally the successor to Torque Drift 1. Now with that being said, let's jump into this, because if you don't know who T-Pain is, you're not gonna care about this video. 5 years ago, T-Pain started drifting. Okay, this is a very real story. His first lesson was actually with Chelsea DeNofa, and he spent a good amount of time with the team RTR with people like Von Gittin Jr. because once he got into it, he was absolutely hooked into the sport. Now, as of 5 years ago, he was just getting started. Now all of a sudden he's starting his own racing team. But this is why it's really exciting, because he talked about it in an interview less than a year ago about how once you get into drifting, you're pretty much hooked. You go to your first event, you do your first ride along, you do your first driving experience, and you realize why almost everybody that starts drifting never stops. And for a long time, that is exactly what T-Pain did. He started practicing, he had a car known as Pickle Rick, and for the most part, it was a really cool story about how a rapper turned into an amateur drifter. Now, over the time of the past 5 years, he's gotten better and better and better, and there's been some setbacks with companies like GMG Automotive, which we will not get into, but it is a really interesting story if you want to hear about some real shit that happened with T-Pain and a random automotive company. That's a good one. He eventually got to a point where he wanted to do something for himself, and he started his own team known as Nappy Boy Automotive, Nappy Boy Racing. And there's a couple people part of this team that you may have heard of before. Hurt Light, he's the president of Nappy Boy Automotive and kind of like the general manager of the whole thing. And Rob Robinson from Auto Extremes. Now, what's the whole point of making a drift team? Now, that's a good question because I've seen a bunch of teams come and go, but Formula Drift teams are probably here to stay. And that's exactly what he wants to do with this team. He wants to get into Formula Drift. He claims it, he wants to get into it because number one, it's exciting, but number two, he feels like there's a lack of inclusivity almost in Formula Drift. Now he goes on to say, and this is a conversation that we've had before, which is just how much diversity sits in Formula Drift in its current day and age. And there really isn't, I don't know, a whole lot just yet. And he wants to broaden the horizon of what people could come to enjoy from Formula Drift. He's not really saying that he doesn't feel invited, but it's like a little bit of a lesser NASCAR. Those are his words, not ours. He does say though, over the last 5 years of learning how to get into a position where he can start a drift team, the number one mistake he quotes, don't watch Chris Fix videos and think you know how to build a whole car. That's exactly why he ended up bringing in people like Rob Robinson and Hurt Life before, because at the end of the day, it's really hard to build some of these drift cars. But he does plan on jumping into Formula Drift with his own racing team. And I think that's really exciting. But you have to do a couple things to join Formula Drift. You can't just like show up. You used to be able to, but not anymore. You see, as of 2023, if T-Pain wants to jump into having his own Formula Drift racing team, he has to actually get a license to race in Formula Drift, or at least somebody in the racing team has to do that. Now, there's 3 ways you can do that to earn licenses as of the 2023 season. Number 1, you have a multi-round championship. Number 2, you have shootouts. And number 3 is kind of like the get out of jail free card where you're scouted. Now, multi-round championships is essentially just a set of 3 or more of events that crown a cumulative championship. There's a bunch of partners out there in the United States. Formula Drift expands that list of potential MRCs every single year. And if you want to learn how to join a Formula Drift team, or if you want to get your license, we'll just put a description link below and you can go follow through the process. Number 2 is a shootout. Now, Pro-Am shootout partners will conduct 2 shootout events with the highest finish ranking team from the 2 shootout events being considered the top finisher and earn eligibility to compete in Formula Drift Pro Spec in the following season. To remember and to remind everybody, you pretty much have Formula Drift and then you have Formula Drift Pro Spec. Most people jump into Pro Spec first and then they make their way finally to the top tier. Number 3 is the scouting program, and that's new for 2023. The FD scouting program is a program available to pretty much all current Pro-Am partners that allows each partner to develop events and programs that are not beholden to Pro-Am rulebook guidelines. And essentially from those events, scout drivers that are interested in a Formula Drift license and have a petition to essentially submit a license on the driver's behalf. So if T-Pain wants to get into Formula Drift, he's gonna have to do one of those 3 things. Most realistically, it would be really cool to see him climb the ladders through a championship round of some kind with the team, with the drivers, because I think that'd be absolutely sick. What does that matter? What does that have to do with the point of this video? Why are you even watching this? Why would T-Pain being involved in Formula Drift matter for people like you and people like me? And I think the reason why I'm telling this story is because I think it's very interesting how most of the time in the past decade, 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, if anybody started to earn a bit of money and they had an interest in cars, they always went to track racing as their number 1 thing that they wanted to do. This is one of the very few cases, I would argue, here in the United States where it seemed like a celebrity had jumped into the motorsport of drifting, not track racing. And that's really cool to hear because the passion of drifting sits everywhere. It's like in musicians, artists, actors, and more. And it's a very cool thing to see the culture of drifting start to finally solidify itself, not just in people that enjoy cars, but people that enjoy the concept of what cars mean. And no matter what it seems like, drifting is starting to soak into the mainstream world. And to me, that's awesome because the more attention you can give a motorsport, the more money it gets, the longer it stays around. Because at the end of the day, a lot of times motorsports have a tendency to die away the moment the money is no longer there. So I'm really excited for T-Pain to start his own Formula Drift team. I'm really curious to see how long it'll take for him to get there. But of course, T-Pain, if you need any help, let me know. All right, we got a Toyota GR86, it's got like 220 horsepower. We'd be willing to run a couple 2-3 laps, some tandems with you, okay? Bring a non-modified car to US Air and we'll see what you can put down, all right? Let me know what you want to see in the video content below. And of course, thank you so much for watching. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram. Thank you for following. Don't forget to subscribe to Torque Motorsport and we will see you later. Adios.